The date for preparing a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine has been announced.
The signing of the peace agreement is scheduled for March. And already in May, the country faces large-scale elections and a referendum. Could the resolution really be near?
And once again, the cycle repeats. Lavrov accused the United States of being unprepared for peace. In
Ankara, we accepted the proposal from the United States.
a stab in the back from Putin's main ally. Russia's shadow fleet takes a hit.
The Indian Coast Guard has detained 3 tankers from Russia's shadow fleet. The vessels, which are under US sanctions, were intercepted during a maritime oil transfer scheme.
The Caucasus has a new patron. Armenia has found an alternative to Russian weapons.
The Ministry of Defense showcased an entire arsenal of the latest equipment purchased from India.
A tough signal to the Kremlin. Strikes on energy infrastructure may intensify.
Zelensky stated, Ukraine is not obliged to choose between Russia's military targets and its own energy sector. As long as Ukrainians live without light and heat, there will be no complete peace in Russia.
A major expansion of Ukraine's defense track in Europe.
By 2026, there will already be 10 Ukrainian export centers in Europe. By mid-February, we will already see the production of our drones in Germany.
Well, this really is breaking news. The Western press is reporting that elections will already be held in Ukraine this spring, and in a few months the war will be over. Very, very soon, apparently. How true this actually is, we'll discuss a bit later. But for now, let me tell you about what I think is an important slap in the face for Putin. A new military alliance between Turkey and Uzbekistan. Essentially, it's an alternative to a kind of small NATO right next to the Kremlin. Well, another knife in the back. India is finishing off Russia's shadow fleet from its former ally. 3 oil tankers were detained near Mumbai. Chechnya. Degree of hatred case. Kadyrov reaches his peak. What will happen after Ramzan's death, and why is this a fatal scenario for Putin personally? We discuss everything in the story, and then with the expert. Let's go.
Ukraine strikes at the aggressor's finances.
As is known, Russia is facing unprecedented sanctions aggression.
New sanctions have been imposed against companies involved in the production of Russian missiles and drones, as well as against entities in the financial sector of the Russian Federation.
Sanctions that are not just a punishment, but can also limit Russia's ability to wage war. In
the sanctions list, 24 individuals and 27 legal entities have been included, among them companies supplying goods for the manufacture of missile and drone components, which Russia uses during strikes on Ukraine.
The production of this weapon would be impossible without foreign critical components, which the Russians continue to obtain by circumventing sanctions.
For example, Madrigal is a company engaged in the development of computer software. The CEO is Mark Berezkin. In addition, he oversees business development. Berezkin calls himself a leader of revival. He was the one who traveled to the occupied part of the Luhansk region, where he conducted his masterclasses.
So, right now we were solving problems. For example, I see certain tasks from my perspective that I would prioritize while they put forward their own hypotheses. And right away you can see the symbiosis between the youth and the middle generation. That's why the most memorable moments are the first tasks of the group stage. Working together with him is Bakukin.
Bakukin works in tandem with him. He is an active Russian entrepreneur. His work is related to the development of computer software and the management of computer hardware. The second decree of the president of Ukraine concerns the financial infrastructure that helps the Russian Federation circumvent international restrictions.
Sanctions have been imposed against entities that support the Russian crypto market and mining.
A total of 42 individuals and 35 legal entities have been sanctioned. Payment operators, cryptocurrency owners, crypto exchanges, and entities that support the Russian crypto market and mining. Among them, Kirill Pronin, who has held the position of Director of the Financial Market Infrastructure Department of the Russian Federation since June 2023.
We must do every single thing within our power to create the right conditions so that, by utilizing the latest advancements in modern financial and cutting-edge digital technologies, we can significantly lower the operational costs for all market participants and enable new investments to be attracted at the lowest possible financial expense.
Sanctions have also been imposed on the director of Kyrgyz Capital Bank of Central Asia, Kantemir Cholbev. Meanwhile, Korolev and Dimitrat hold executive positions and are involved with data centers and servers. Among them may be enterprises from the Russian military-industrial complex, oil and gas, metallurgy, aerospace sectors, as well as telecommunications giants. Ukrainian hackers have already destroyed such data centers in the aggressor country more than once.
These are 400 virtual and 42 physical servers that housed internal documentation, backups, and other programs through which clients remotely managed production processes at enterprises.
Ulaki is also on the new sanctions list. This is a Russian company specializing in real-time international payments. This company helped circumvent sanctions and purchase goods in China. Sanctions have been imposed on the A7 cryptocurrency network. Through this network, payments are made for the supply of components used in the production of Russian drones and missiles.
It is not right to leave everything as it is today. Moreover, when such phenomena are happening now in our foreign trade, which is already complicated by sanctions and so on, we believed it was essential to launch a project with a ruble stablecoin so that there would be liquid ruble instruments on the blockchain which could be used to settle foreign trade transactions.
Buying and exchanging digital currency. This allows them to move money bypassing sanctions.
You can exchange your digital currencies for our token and then for fiat money.
So that's how it is, right? In
2025, the United Kingdom had already imposed sanctions against the cryptocurrency sector of the Russian Federation, which included A7.
Developed by a company owned by a fugitive oligarch, since February 2025 it has processed transactions totaling more than $9.3 billion. According to a report by the British Centre for Information Resilience, a 7A5 can also be used in foreign political influence campaigns conducted by the Kremlin.
A new package of sanctions from the European Union is also on the way. The head of European diplomacy, Kadyrov, stated that work on the new package of sanctions is ongoing. As for
the 20th package of sanctions, we are aiming to move forward with it. February 24th, this proposal is on the table. Therefore, the work continues.
These newly implemented sanctions are specifically designed to significantly reduce the Russian Federation's revenues from the export of energy resources, neutralizing the shadow fleet, and effectively blocking various complex schemes to circumvent existing restrictions.
Dmitry Levus is joining our broadcast, an international political analyst. Dmitry, hello. We're glad to see you.
Hello.
Let's talk about what I think is the most hyped topic right now. It's the possibility of holding elections in Ukraine. Western media, including Reuters, are writing about this, about a peace agreement between the US and Ukraine. Obviously, we're talking about the Russian-Ukrainian war. Well, in general, it's supposedly it's on the table. The draft of this agreement between Russia and Ukraine, first and foremost, could be ready as early as March. According to this timeline, a referendum in Ukraine on the points of the peace agreement is planned to be held together with the elections in May. So please explain, as someone who is professionally involved in politics, are there any prerequisites at all for elections to be held in Ukraine in May? And in general, why should they take place? What are you paying attention to here?
As for me, no. And I'm right to pay attention to this. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. I first heard about elections being held in Ukraine back in April 2022. And supposedly they were supposed to take place at the end of May 2022. In other words, it was as if everything had already been decided. In my opinion, this is one of the elements of Russia's information and psychological warfare. Spreading this topic about supposed upcoming elections, or that there is allegedly some kind of agreement, when in reality, as we can clearly see, there are, to put it mildly, no conditions for this at all. And first and foremost, that there is absolutely no need for these elections. Then another point is that it is illegal. Right now, holding elections during a war that hasn't ended is illegal. And especially now, as various Western media outlets and news organizations are writing about this, reporting and suggesting that this event would supposedly happen simultaneously with a formal public referendum. But how can such a referendum actually take place if at that exact moment, the situation is so unstable? In other words, it implies that there can be no end to the hostilities. Our legislation is exceptionally clear and well-defined, and it explicitly stipulates in an entirely unambiguous manner that Ukraine's legitimate government continues to hold its rightful authority throughout the duration of wartime until all those conditions under which elections can and should be held. And again, another question arises. Why are we talking about elections in Ukraine, but not about elections in Moscow, where there is no legitimate government at all, where there is no constitution as such? Because back in 2020, they violated the constitution once again. in a completely unnatural way just to transform Putin into the man who resets the clock, so that supposedly all of his previous terms would no longer count, effectively allowing him to remain in power in Russia indefinitely into the future. The so-called elections they hold not only fail to meet any democratic standards, but they also take place in territories that are not recognized by the world. These territories are actually occupied by Russia. For example, since 2014, they've been holding them in Crimea. Since 2022, in other occupied Ukrainian territories as well. So in reality, they have neither a parliament nor a president. So this is the counter question that the international community, and first and foremost the United States, should be raising regarding the Russian Federation. So in our current situation, it's clear that this is obviously playing into Russia's hands, as if to say, we need to hold elections. It's clear that even if, let's say, they do go ahead with holding them, elections like these held simultaneously with a referendum, although what kind of referendum would that even be? Ukraine has internationally recognized territory, which what kind of changes could possibly be made there? No, there's no way. That's simply not possible. We can say with complete and utter certainty at this point that after this, it still doesn't mean that Moscow will recognize the Ukrainian government as legitimate. So every single bit of this is absolutely nothing more than just a series of carefully crafted talking points meant to distract us from the truth. Once again, they're being thrown out there just to later accuse Ukraine of being unconstructive, and so on and so forth. I truly believe it is absolutely, completely impossible, Yabs, and I am certain that it simply will not happen. Moreover, it doesn't even align with Ukrainian law, even if you start to imagine some scenario there. It's February right now. What elections in March? That doesn't fit with any legal timelines at all. And another point, how can we ensure both the safety of holding elections and the safety of millions of people who are in temporarily occupied territories, millions who are forced to stay abroad in other countries, those who are fighting right now, and overall security? Where are the guarantees that Russia won't strike directly at the electoral districts during this time? After they destroyed Ukrainian cities, right now they're striking at heat generation facilities, literally. It's hard to even describe how they go into ecstasy at the word Holodomor, at what they've done. They get a kick out of being genocidal, so why wouldn't they strike at polling stations? No, of course they will. It's absolutely obvious.
Yes, we've come to an interesting point. It turns out that the topic seems positive. The end of the war, the cessation of deaths, casualties, and everything else. But behind it lies something that has absolutely nothing to do with reality. And what do you think, Dmitry, about the statement by Matthew Whitaker? I'm quoting him. And let me remind your audience that he is the US ambassador to NATO. He says the following: I don't think anything like that was said or voiced by the United States. Regarding what Zelensky said, that the US has supposedly set some kind of deadline for ending the war. We want both sides to come together and agree on a peace settlement. We would like this to happen as soon as possible, and we want the suffering and killing in Ukraine to stop. Tell me, please, isn't this really just directly playing into Kremlin narratives? Well, listen, who is actually against ending the suffering? Is there even a single person in Ukraine who supports this? So why do people say this then? As if it changes anything at all.
Well, it's also equating the aggressor and the victim.
Thanks for not saying that the victims are, I don't know, in Belgorod, maybe in Penza.
Yes, and another point. By the way, Whitaker, of course, as an ambassador, can say whatever he wants, but the fact that there were deadlines being set, there's no doubt about that. Let's remember Comrade Trump, who at the beginning, when those so-called 28 points from Dmitriev appeared, which were presented as Whitaker's points, what did he say about them? That the agreement had to be signed by Thanksgiving. Later, as the process went on and those 28 points turned into 20, it was already Christmas time. But then Trump himself personally started saying that, yes, there were never any deadlines set, and this is coming from the president who said that he would need exactly 1 day, just 1 day, to end this war, which is in general quite something. It was apparently said sincerely because later it hurt, and they even had to launch an information campaign to whitewash it, which included, for example, General Kellogg, who said, yes, that's how it will be, but no one ever said when it would happen. That's not true. Trump did say when it would happen that he wouldn't even have taken the presidential seat yet, yes, and it would already be done by then. So naturally, it was stated unambiguously. And of course, I truly believe that in this specific case, it is certainly not intended to be an act of diplomatic support, and it is definitely not a form of strategic pressure being exerted on the Russian Federation by the current American administration at this particular moment in time. And the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is absolutely right and logical in saying that in order for the war to end, there must be pressure on Russia. Because I think that over this past year, the American side could have already realized that the absence of pressure hasn't led to peace in any way.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
I want to ask you, Dmytro, about what I think is actually a revolutionary event. Today, 3 tankers were arrested off the coast of Mumbai. It is said that these tankers were transporting Russian oil products, although they sail under other flags, of course, and it's being reported that these are Iranian tankers. What do you think about this? Does this mean that India really is still more afraid of losing trade ties with the US than of being friends with Russia and buying Russian oil? What is your opinion on this event?
I, by the way, really do think that the West and ties with the United States are much more beneficial for India. India is integrated into the global economy, and its contacts with the West are much more pragmatic. Why? Because after all, yes, despite the entire scope of military technical cooperation between India and Russia, which is also rooted in it was the historical Soviet era. And now we see this kind of blatant and unchecked open exploitation of Russia's difficult situation to assist in circumventing sanctions. These substantial discounts on crude oil, which are turning the nation into such a major global consumer, are still very much in effect today. To put it another way, we are currently looking at what are, let's say, rather limited things in terms of scope. But we can definitely say with absolute certainty that a clear and decisive refusal of Russian oil imports would have likely happened if there had been a very tough, unified, and uncompromising stance taken by the international community from the very beginning, position from the United States. So far, what we've seen is that just a few days ago, Modi, the Prime Minister of India, when commenting on agreements with the United States, with Trump, basically avoided talking about what actually happened with Russia, with Russian oil, whether they will buy it or not. Taking all of these factors into account, we can conclude that, at least for the foreseeable future, if India does not see any severe international consequences or sanctions for this, it will likely persist in its current strategy of purchasing Russian oil. And in any case, they will try to drag this out as long as possible. Yes, it's likely that these purchases will decrease. But I personally think that the current trend itself, which is clearly emerging right now, probably suggests that this is exactly where things are heading in the future. But this is not necessarily because Washington wants to pressure Russia to finally end the ongoing war in Ukraine. Here, it's more about clearing the market for the purchase of American oil and also Venezuelan oil, which will be under the control of the United States. That's the logic behind it.
Just to continue from what you said, I'm watching a video right now, and I honestly don't understand. Was this today? Obviously, it was a few days ago, because the video is already edited. The US has seized another Russian tanker from the Shadow Fleet. The Pentagon has released footage. Well, it all looks just perfect. I think soon this will become such a regular occurrence that we'll stop even discussing it as news. But to wrap up, Dmitry, I want to ask you this. There's something interesting about health here. An article about Kadyrov has come out in the media. Once again, they're predicting his imminent demise. Of course, none of this has happened yet. Let's not speculate about when it might happen. But I want to ask about the consequences if Ramzan Kadyrov's figure really disappears from, let's say, the Olympus of the occupied, annexed Caucasian republics of the Russian Federation, what could this lead to? Because here they're describing some interesting scenarios, saying that things could really flare up. Interclan struggle. All of this will distract Russia not only from the war, but in general, well, everything will start to fall apart because a power struggle will begin internally. What do you think about this? Are experts exaggerating these kinds of consequences?
I think that in reality, a significant and deep-seated crisis will inevitably arise that it could lead to such grave consequences because, after all, an immense amount of political stability is closely tied to Kadyrov, and a vast number of critical things depend directly on him. Not only the occupied Chechnya, but in general, he is, well, clearly an undeniable and central pillar of power, and this is true for various other neighboring republics, and it is also the case across the broader territory of the Russian Federation. Still, I wouldn't want to be overly definitive or categorical when making these specific assessments by suggesting that immediately after Kadyrov's death, absolutely anything could happen. Why exactly do I feel this way? Because after all, the vertical of power, in my opinion, has been established. I think there definitely won't be stability in Russia. This Kadyrov pie will be fiercely fought over. Definitely. There won't be. That will disappear. The overall power and political influence of his clan on the scale of the entire Russian Federation, let's put it this way, will experience a very substantial and noticeable decline. But when it comes to the question of what will happen next, and whether there will definitely be such a direct armed confrontation, I am simply not in a position to assert or claim that so categorically at this moment. But that it will weaken Putin's regime, yes, that is absolutely beyond any doubt. Thank you.
Very much. Dmitry Levus, political scientist and international affairs expert, was on the air of Ukraine today. All the best.